Osama. I recently graduated from the University of California, Irvine, over in Southern California. Irvine is within the county of Orange County, which is right between San Diego, which is on the border with Mexico, and also where I grew up, and Los Angeles. And really my story goes back in time about 2 years ago, exactly actually. And 2 years ago, in late January 2010, we received an email from the campus School of Social Sciences, which is one of the departments on campus, and the school, I was part of that school. And so the email was saying that His Excellency Michael B. Oren, the Ambassador of Israel to the United States, was going to be coming to our campus on February 8th, 2010. And the event was going to be sponsored by the Political Science Department, the UCI Law School, as well as countless other pro-Zionist groups from off campus, as well as pro-Zionist groups on campus. The main one being the Anteaters for Israel. Our mascot is Anteaters at UC Irvine. It's not exactly the Spartans. I understand it's not so cool, but it is what it is. We are the Anteaters. And so, really for us, the manner in which the university was describing and really honoring Michael Oren and really rolling out the red carpet for Michael Oren was really a slap in the face to a lot of the students on our campus, as well as in our view, tacit approval of Israeli policies in regards to what had been happening in the Gaza Strip by the manner in which they were honoring him. No mention was ever made, and the event is coming mere days after the 1-year anniversary of the ending of Operation Cast Lead, where Israel began a bombardment of the Gaza Strip, leading to the death of over 1,400 people, 1,400 Palestinians within the Gaza Strip. I've heard estimates of over 2/3 of which were civilians, including hundreds of women and children. And so Michael Oren had actually, and we were well aware of this fact, that Michael Oren had played an intricate role within Operation Cast Lead as the Israeli military spokesperson for Operation Cast Lead. And along with that, he had had a history of contributing to the atrocities that the Israeli military had enacted upon the Palestinian people and upon other people, including his role as a paratrooper in Lebanon in the 1980s, in which 30,000 civilians were killed. And so Michael Oren had a history in this situation, and we were well aware of the history of the situation. Yet no mention was ever made. In fact, he was just described as His Excellency mere days after the 1-year anniversary of Operation Cast Lead. And for a lot of the students on campus, it was a slap in the face because Operation Cast Lead was personal for them. Some of them had lost family members, including one girl on our campus whose family comes from the Gaza Strip. Her uncle had woken up for dawn prayers one day during Operation Cast Lead, and he had lit a candle. And he had gone to go wash up in order to perform prayers, and he places the candle. There's no power at the time, so he has a candle. He places the candle, and an Israeli sniper catches sight of the light of the candle. He takes aim, he fires, and the man ends up dying in the hands of his wife. And this is somebody's uncle from our campus. Me, myself, I'm not Palestinian. In fact, most of the students who protested that day were not Palestinian. And we came from different ethnicities. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But even for 3 of the Irvine 11, they were from Palestine. 1 was from the West Bank and 2 were from the Gaza Strip. And the 2 from the Gaza Strip actually had members of their family, cousins of theirs, who had also been killed in Operation Cast Lead. They were not combatants, they were not fighters. They were simple civilians who happened to be caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. And in the Gaza Strip, it's easy to be caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. If you run a major freeway through the Gaza Strip, it probably won't take you 30 minutes to go from the bottom end of the Gaza Strip to the top end. It's really tiny, and there's 2 million people that live within that small strip of land. Extremely densely populated, and it had been under siege for so many years, so it really was in no position to withstand such a military bombardment. And one of the reasons why it was personal for me also, not being Palestinian, I had actually had the opportunity about 5 months after Operation Cast Lead to visit the Gaza Strip. George Galloway, Member of Parliament from Britain, had actually come to UC Irvine, and he had been going around the country promoting a campaign that he called Viva Palestina. And the purpose of the campaign, originally it started in Britain. The purpose of the campaign was to send aid convoys after Operation Cast Lead to both help the humanitarian aspect of what was going on in Gaza Strip, but also to challenge politically the siege on Gaza that Israel, with the help of the Hosni Mubarak regime in Egypt, was enacting upon the Palestinian people. So a bunch of us from UC Irvine, he comes, he really wants to do one. He did the first one from Britain, the second one he wants to do from America. And this one was threefold. The first 2 reasons I mentioned, but the third reason for doing it from America was that the United States provides more military and financial support to Israel than it does to any other country in the world. So this was a way to show that despite the fact that the US government pretty much supports anything Israel does, that the American people themselves stand in solidarity with the people of Gaza. And that despite what the US government might do, the American people will help the Gazan people. And so that was part of the reason behind Viva Palestina, at least coming from America. And so a bunch of us from Irvine, and really across the country went. We just had a big group go from Irvine and the surrounding Southern California community, maybe a group of like 20 of us. We were all friends, we all knew each other. And so we decided, you know what, let's go, why not? So we get to Egypt, and the whole point is to cross from Egypt into the Gaza Strip. And we have aid convoys and the whatnot, and I won't get into too many details of all of that. But in the end, we're supposed to go for 3 days, but we're denied access to go for 3 days, and the Egyptian government allows us 24 hours into Gaza. And even the 24 hours is a bit of a stretch, because we came in at night. And so it was 24 hours started from the time we came in, which was maybe around 7 p.m. And so we get there, by the time we get settled, we eat something quick, it's time to go to sleep, we wake up, and we have till 7 p.m. So you can imagine we're a group of over 150 people. It's not really 24 hours at that point, we maybe have like 10 or 12 hours. And we condensed a 3-day trip into about 12 hours. And being in the Gaza Strip is a surreal feeling. It's very hard to describe to someone who hasn't been there, but it really is this idea that you have entered upon a Hollywood set, and they're filming the movie of 2012 or some apocalypse movie in which a natural disaster has come into the surrounding region and just destroyed everything. Because it becomes house after building, after factory, after workplace, after school, after mosque, after hospital, after building, completely leveled and destroyed. And there's no ability to clean up, so the rubble is just there, it remains there. Just huge piles of cement. And you begin to, honestly, you can't understand, it doesn't feel real, because it's so devastating, and it has such an empowering effect upon you of just hopelessness at times. And it doesn't get real until somebody hears the convoy buses coming through and they poke their head out of the rubble, and it hits you that this is where somebody lives. And that this may be my 24 hours, but this is somebody's 365 days of the year. And that they have to deal with this for every single day. And you can't escape the remnants of the war, whether it's the bullet holes that riddle all the buildings. And I'm not talking about little 9mm bullets. I'm talking about huge artillery shells that are just littering these houses. And it really becomes, you see house after house you can tell me, okay, one house on the second story around the window has some bullet holes. Okay, maybe someone was fighting out of that house. But then it becomes every single house is the same exact story, and it becomes clear to you that the Israeli soldiers were dealing with the Gaza Strip as if they were playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and they're playing with people's lives as if it's a video game. And the way in which you see it is shocking. Just to see that and to hear from people, and really we heard a few stories from different people that have left at least a profound impact on my life, and a profound impact in understanding the Palestinian struggle. And the Palestinian struggle wasn't something that was new to me. I grew up around it, not being Palestinian, but just understanding the plight of the Palestinian people and the fight against the occupation that they were dealing with. But one man that spoke to us, he had actually been in Israeli prison for a long time. And then he's originally from the West Bank, and there's no connection between the West Bank and Gaza at this point. And so it came time, the Israeli warden, or the Israeli governing body of the prison, came up to him and asked him, you have a choice. But before we give you the choice, understand one thing. You're not going back to the West Bank, you're never seeing your family again, so get that out of your head. But we give you one of two choices. Either you can stay here with us in Israeli prisons, or you can go to the Gaza Strip. And so he decided, you know what, I will go to the Gaza Strip, and that's really how we got to meet this man. And the second story, for me at least, is probably the most profound story I have from Gaza. And it was, we had gone to the Ministry of Detainees. The Ministry of Detainees in the Gaza Strip is a ministry that's dedicated to helping secure the release of the thousands of Palestinians that are in Israeli prison. And the Ministry of Detainees is probably, the reason why we went there was because it's one of the few large buildings that happens to still be standing that can accommodate a crowd of over 150 people. And so we get into the Ministry of Detainees, it's a big crowd, so I'm sitting all the way in the back, and I wear glasses. So when I wear, at least in class, not really outside of class too much, but I can't see too far. And so there was a group of 3 girls who were talking. At least I knew they were girls just because of their voices. And when they talked, I could have sworn they were over the age of 25 or 30, just from the maturity in their voice, their ability to express their emotions. And they were giving us a story of what had happened to them. And it didn't strike me until I had gone up to them, and I got close to them, that I realized that these are about no older than 12 years old. And in fact, as I found out later, not one of them was older than 12 years old. These 3 girls are known as the Samuni girls. They're 3 cousins, and they happen to be some of the last remaining members of their family. And in the Gaza Strip, there's a big family called the Samuni family, and they have occupied a street within the Gaza Strip that's nicknamed, I don't know if it's nicknamed or if it's actually called, but it's referred to as Samuni Street just because of the sheer amounts of people of that last name that live there. And so these 3 girls during Operation Cast Lead were huddled with their family. Their families had gotten together in order to stay together during Operation Cast Lead, and had huddled into one house. And the Israeli military, the Israeli Air Force, targeted this house and unleashed an airstrike upon the house that completely killed their entire family, killing over 30 members of these 3 girls' families. One girl, the one that was about 11 years old, had lost her brothers, her parents, all of her siblings. She had lost everyone in her immediate family. And she was the only one left. And this is a girl who was about 11 years old. And she kept reiterating a question throughout the entire time. And she would keep asking, what did I do to Israel for them to take away my family? And to hear a girl continuously ask that question, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? It sticks with you. And it hurts to hear a little girl have to ask a question like that. And so for us, when Michael Oren came to campus, it was never a matter of should we do something. It was always a matter of what should we do. And really to be proactive to the fact that Michael Oren is coming to campus. And we're college students. And what do college students do? We protest. When we don't like something, we protest. And that's the way we get out our message. Because that's what we do on colleges. And at least in California, we have a history of protest and activism. I know oftentimes you guys see the TV, California's palm trees and beaches and 75 degrees every single day. And it is, and it's beautiful, but it's also the home of the Black Panthers. It's also the home of, University of California, Berkeley, San Jose State, San Francisco State. We have a proud tradition of protest within California. And it's the Wild West. When you don't like somebody, you tell them you don't like them. Because that's just how it is in California. And so, we're going to do that. We're going to protest because that's what we do. And so we get together, the concerned students on campus, both Muslim and non-Muslim, we get together the Wednesday before the event. The event was scheduled for a Monday, and Michael Oren is coming on a Monday, and we're going to start planning beforehand. We had gone through a bunch of email discussions in which we brought up the different forms of protest that we might want to think about. And then we decided, there's so many different ideas going around, there's so much discussion happening around this, we need to meet in person. So the Wednesday before, we meet in person and we begin to go through the long laundry list of ideas that are being thrown around. And so we have a ton of ideas for protesting, from some people who think, let's just issue a press release and only, maybe not even show up to the event, don't even give him our time, he's not even worth our time, to let's just show up, let's tape our mouths, and let's have a silent walkout. And then there's another extreme where somebody had suggested that we actually go into the auditorium, find where the speaker system is for the student center where the event was taking place, unplug their speakers, and let's plug in an iPod or an MP3 player and just have fun with it and play whatever we want to play for the entire event. Obviously, we didn't go with any one of those ideas. That's just to give you an idea of the thoughts that were being thought up of at that point in time. In the end, we decided on another idea that was brought up at least we referred to as the University of Chicago style protest. And the reason why we called it University of Chicago style protest was because someone had put up in the email thread a YouTube video of a protest that had occurred a few months before at the University of Chicago when Ehud Olmert, a former Israeli politician, I believe, I'm not sure if he had held a position in government at that specific time or if he had held it before, I'm not remembering, but it was in late 2009 when the event occurred. And people protested that day, and it was actually 30 students and a professor from the University of Chicago who would stand up one by one, yell out towards the podium where Ehud Olmert was speaking in order to protest the Israeli policies that he was talking about, especially in regards to Operation Cast Lead. And they would yell out. Sometimes you can't even hear what they say on the video. Other times you can see that actually they're reading off of a list, and you can hear the girl who's saying it, as well as other students. They're reading off of a list of the people who have been killed during Operation Cast Lead, and just reading off the names, reading off the names, reading off the names. And sometimes they would go for a very long time. They would go for 30 seconds, a minute, and then the police would come, grab them, escort them out of the auditorium, and that was it. Nobody was academically disciplined, nobody was arrested. This is to give you an idea of our mindset. Nobody was academically disciplined and nobody was arrested. Because it's a college, you protest, right? And so we decided, you know what, that sounds kind of cool. And even at UC Irvine, which is a historically apathetic campus, unlike some of our sister schools, we, even in November of 2009, a few months before, we had tuition fee hikes that were just destroying the University of California system and continue to destroy it. Just as, so people are aware, the University of California system used to be for free like 30 or 40 years ago until Ronald Reagan destroyed the entire system and started charging students. And it was supposed to be a free public education for California residents. In about 2 or 3 years, it's supposed to go up to $22,000 a year. Yeah, I see some shock, yes. It's rough for California students, especially middle class and low-income students. And so, to protest against the UC Regents, which is our governing body, trying to increase tuition, we decided to have a huge protest at UCI. And it was a random Tuesday right before Thanksgiving. You know, nothing happens right before Thanksgiving. Students are getting ready to go home. But then all of a sudden, a small protest turns into a 1,500-person protest in front of the administration building. And UCI is built on a circle. We have, the middle of the campus is Aldrich Park, which is a nice little park with trees and grass and whatnot. And then the outer rim of Aldrich Park forms what we call Ring Road. It's a cement walkway that goes for about a mile. And we're a campus of 30,000 students. So we're a decently sized campus. We have a lot of lecture halls, and all of our lecture halls are situated on Ring Road. And so each lecture hall holds about 500 people, and there's dozens of them on campus. We have 1,500 people. We finally have numbers at a protest. So we decided, you know what, why not go through all of campus and rally up the troops and return back in front of the administration building and finish the protest off there. And so the idea is to go through all these buildings, and one by one we would get to each building. And then what would happen when we got to each building, and what did happen, is that the students would come through every available door. And they would come from the bottom doors, the side doors, the top doors, everything, and go up and down the aisles. There's dozens of students who are going up and down the aisle. There's probably another 1,000 students outside, and everybody's chanting, walk out, walk out, walk out. And the classes would be completely disrupted. And sometimes the professor wouldn't be able to continue, and so he'd be like, you know what, class is dismissed, everyone can leave. And so the students would leave. Other times, though, the program would continue, and the class would continue, and actually, one student gets up on stage in one of the lecture halls, and he starts yelling out to the crowd, everybody, your tuition is being increased, it's time to go out and it's time to protest. And the professor is not too fond of this. And they actually get into a heated debate and exchange on the stage, and the two of them begin a shoving match, and they start pushing each other. Finally, it's broken up by other students. Now, the reason why I mention all of this is that the UC Irvine Police Department, as well as the university administration, including the administrators who are in charge of our disciplinary hearings, were all present at the protest and following the protest along the entire time. Once again, nobody was academically disciplined, nobody was arrested. Just to give you guys our mindset, that you can disrupt completely academic discourse, classroom, whatever it is on campus, and it's cool. And so this is something we had even seen. These are just 2 examples. I could give a laundry list of examples if anyone really would like to hear them. But this is at least what was in our mind at that point in time. And so we decide, okay, University of Chicago style protest, but we're going to modify it just a tad bit to match what we want to do. And so we wanted to make sure, when you have a protest, you oftentimes have priorities in your protest. Sometimes the priority is to educate the crowd or to educate the audience that is coming. Other times it could be to send a message. And for us, the #1 priority was to send a message, not to necessarily educate the audience. We understood that Michael Oren was going on a long tour of the entire UC system in order to rally up the troops. And UC Irvine, being in Irvine, and being in Orange County more specifically, is a very, very pro-Zionist county. It has a very large community of pro-Zionists within it. And so really Irvine was a stop in order to rally the troops, and in light of the international criticism that Israel had been receiving for the past year. And we knew this specifically also because the New York Times had published an article saying that Israel was in this attempt for the past year to rebrand itself in light of the international criticism it had received. So we knew, we had an idea of what was going on. So it was never to educate the audience. We understood the audience most likely had their minds made up for the most part. It was to send a message to Michael Oren. This is the highest level political official of Israel, in the United States, and he's coming to our campus. And honestly, he's probably the biggest speaker to ever come to campus outside of Bill Nye the Science Guy and President Jimmy Carter. And so for us, this is a golden opportunity to send a message that's going to go directly to Tel Aviv. And we understood that we wanted to send a message straight to the Israeli government that UC Irvine, despite the fact it's in Orange County, is a pro-Palestinian campus. And that propagating Israeli policies, especially murderous Israeli policies, in light of what is being done to the Palestinian people, is not going to fly on our campus without us having something to say about it. And so that was the idea. Now, if the audience happened to hear what we had to say and someone had a light bulb, strike in their head when they heard what we had to say, great, it's an added benefit, but that's not the priority at this point in time. In other protests, we have other priorities, but in this protest, that was the main priority, was to send a message. And so we got together, and the idea was, and this was the guideline, the plan for the protest when it comes to Monday night. We would have 3x5 index cards. I know it sounds lame, and I know it sounds tame compared to other protests, and it really was when I describe it. You'll have a better understanding. We had 3x5 index card, and each 3x5 index card would have a sentence, 2 sentences, probably no more than 3 sentences. I think one of the guys had a 3-sentence statement. And the statements would be completely political, in order to avoid any emotional outbursts, anyone standing up and yelling, cursing at Michael Oren, anybody getting and saying something vulgar. That was the point of the statement, was to avoid an emotional outburst, was to say direct and to the point, and to send a political statement to Michael Oren. And on top of that, it was, you say your statement, 2 or 3 sentences, and then you begin to leave. Peacefully, you leave, and you walk outside of the auditorium, and you wait until, the entire protest is done, the event is done, kick it in the student center for a while until everyone else finishes up. And then also on top of that, sorry, I lost my train of thought real quick. But, so the idea was that police orders. If the police tell you something, you obey police orders. That was the idea. Do not resist arrest. Now, I mention arrest for a reason. There was an idea of arrest, and amongst the students who ended up protesting that night, there was a debate between us and a difference of opinion amongst us as to whether or not arrest was a viable option. Now, the ones who didn't think arrest was going to happen was simply because we're not doing anything illegal. The ones who did think arrest was going to happen, I being one of them, didn't think that what we were doing was illegal per se, but that arrest may be used as an intimidation factor against us. Now, the mindset that we had going into this was the same one. It's an understanding of the context within which you live. When I go to the airport being Muslim, or when I go to the airport being Arab, I understand that when I go to the airport, I may most likely be randomly searched or selected for random searching because of the way I'm dressed, because of my name, because of whatever it is. It's not, the fact that I like the fact that I'm randomly searched. It's an understanding that I will be randomly searched, despite the fact I may disagree with it. Now, that's an understanding of the context within which we live, understanding that I live in the post-9/11 era. You don't have to agree with it, but it's good to understand it. And so for us being at UC Irvine, it's a campus that had historically, for the past 10 years, ever since pro-Palestinian activism had really ignited the campus, had been attempting to stifle pro-Palestinian activism. And there's a lot of reasons for that, in terms of donors, in terms of funding, in terms of the UC Regent's governing body, having at the head of it a very, very pro-Zionist person, and the ADL itself having a lot of influence on the UC campuses. I could get into all of that if anyone really would like to hear that, maybe in question and answers. Anyways, it's an understanding of the context, and that UC Irvine specifically has attempted to stifle pro-Palestinian activism for a very, very, very long time. And that arrest would be more the fact that administration has a private police force at its discretion, the UC Irvine Police Department. And when they say arrest that person, UCI police says we hear and we obey, and that person is arrested. And it's simply that. Not because they're doing anything illegal, and if we are arrested, it's not because we did something illegal, but to intimidate us. And at the end of the day, who's going to prosecute this case, and what kind of judge is going to allow for this, this trial to take up his time? People don't get prosecuted for protesting. It's America. Freedom of speech. And so that was the mindset. It would be used to intimidate us. And so the idea behind it also, when we got onto Monday and we're getting ready for the protest, was the understanding that we were going to challenge power at this point in time. And when challenging power, especially state power, there's a need to understand what you're going up against. Because between state powers and citizens, there's a huge disparity. We're not on the same playing field. State power has the media, state power has money, state power has army, state power has power that states have. I don't think it needs too much explanation. And so we understood that we're civilians going up against state power and that this disparity exists between us. And oftentimes, in order for state powers to enhance their legitimacy and to enhance their powers, they allow for certain forms of dissent. And they allow for certain forms in which you can challenge them. Now, in the idea of this event, Michael Oren would be up on the stage giving his lecture and talking about the historical legacy of Israel and the United States was what he was talking about that night. And so he would be giving his lecture from off the stage. Now, the manner in which he would allow for you to dissent in order to enhance his legitimacy would be through question and answers. And that's the way you can challenge. For us, to challenge Michael Oren in the way in which he wants to be challenged is not a challenge. And so for us, in order to challenge Michael Oren, we need to throw a little bit of a curveball at him. And we kind of have to use, I guess you could say, guerrilla warfare tactics, in the sense that you have conventional warfare and you have guerrilla warfare. And the purpose of guerrilla warfare is that you can pop up out of anywhere. You have the territory. It's your home. It's your territory. You know where you can pop out of. You know where you can go back and hide into. And so in that way, you throw some curveballs at him. And for us, we knew what we had, and that was the element of surprise. And with Michael Oren, we would be able to situate ourselves throughout the auditorium, and at different points in time, we would just pop up out of nowhere, yell out a statement, and then we would begin to walk out. And the fact that we were yelling out the statement in such a way in which no one was really expecting it, no one knew at what point in time it would come, it was just these random times, boom, 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 boom. Michael Oren wouldn't know what's hitting him, and that would be our curveball, and that would really be able to enhance our message. And that maybe if we had asked it during question and answer session, it wouldn't have the same power and the same effect and the same ability to have that curveball effect as it would just at random times throughout his lecture. And in that way, he would get the point, and in that way, he would remember what happened at UCI for a very long time. And by him remembering it, we would hope that when he goes back to Tel Aviv and he goes back to report to his superiors within the Israeli government, he'd be like, hey, you know what? I got a lot of heat at UC Irvine. And so doing that, it would be mission accomplished. And so we got into the room, 700-person auditorium on that Monday night, and Michael Oren begins talking. We situate ourselves throughout different parts of the lecture hall. Now we ended up getting the back left of the lecture hall, and the middle left, the back right, and the middle right. We wanted to get into the middle, but we weren't allowed to. The administration had actually taped off the middle section of the auditorium with caution tape. And the reason why they had taped off the middle section of the auditorium with caution tape was that about 4 years ago, actually, Daniel Pipes, a very well-known Islamophobe, had come to our campus, sponsored by some campus clubs, not the administration themselves. And the Muslim Student Union at the time decided to protest. And so the manner in which they protested was they got into the lecture hall. It wasn't like, the 500-person lecture hall. It was a bit smaller, and they took up the entire middle section of the auditorium, or of the lecture hall, and waited until Michael Oren would say something racist, because it wasn't a matter of if he would say something racist, but when he would say something racist. So he says something really racist, and one of the guys gets up and yells at him. He starts yelling Daniel Pipes, and all the students get up and they begin chanting, and it takes them 2 or 3 minutes to get outside of the auditorium. And then the protest is over, they continue protesting outside. And actually one of the administrators who was there, and the same administrator who was trailing the tuition fee hikes protest, who was the same administrator who was in charge of our disciplinary hearings, goes up to the Muslim Student Union leadership after the protest and says, hey guys, great job tonight, that's a great way to protest. Just to add on a little bit more in order for people to understand the context of what happened. So he tells them, you know what, that's a great way to protest. This same administrator is the one who ends up putting the caution tape around the middle section of the auditorium, and we know this because he testified to it in court. And this time, UC Irvine was sponsoring the event itself. And to have a huge amount of people go occupy the middle section of the auditorium, stand up, and walk out like they did to Daniel Pipes, which was embarrassing to the organizers of that event, who happened to be students. This time it would be embarrassing to the university. And the Muslim Student Union had brought in numbers. And I know it's a 700-person room. The Muslim Student Union, I'm not claiming, I helped out in this in any way, because I wasn't there at the time. The year before I got there, the Muslim Student Union had a 2,000-person protest from the community, the Muslim community and the surrounding community, when the college Republicans decided to bring the Danish cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, just as a way to incite the Muslim students on campus. So they had a 2,000-person protest from the surrounding Muslim community, as well as surrounding MSAs in the other colleges, the community colleges of the area. It was a huge protest, so MSU could bring in numbers, and if MSU wanted to fill up 700 seats, they were very well capable of doing so from the community. And so the administration was well aware of these facts. And so we get there, the middle section is blocked off, and we're pushed off to the margins of the auditorium. Thankfully, we got seats in the end, and we situate ourselves throughout different areas of the room. Michael Oren comes in, and the event begins. And a minute or two into his event, I'm the first one to go, and I get up and I yell out, "Michael Oren propagating murder is not an expression of free speech." And then I begin to walk off to the aisle, and I had a little bit more to say in my statement, and according to plan, I wasn't supposed to raise my voice above the level of the crowd, and the crowd had already begun responding, some booing, some cheering, some people yelling nasty things at me, and so I began to walk off. The rest of my statement was, the only stand you deserve to take is in front of the International Criminal Court. But nobody ever got to hear that part. I just mumbled it off as the crowd began to respond. And I walked off in order to leave. I get to the aisle, where I'm grabbed by police and then taken to a back room. Now I get to the back room and I'm put in front of a table pretty much the size of this table, and it's just stacked with handcuffs. Metal handcuffs, not the plastic handcuffs that they often use on protesters, especially, or non-violent protesters, I should say, but metal handcuffs that are used on criminals. And this thing was stacked with handcuffs. And the reason why I mention all of this is because the UC Irvine administration was ready to arrest anybody who stood up that night, despite the fact that the MC of the event, Professor Mark Petraka, who's also the chair of the political science department, gets up on the mic. I didn't find this out till later because I couldn't hear anything at this point in time. I'm being arrested. I'm in a whole different room. He gets up on the mic, grabs the microphone, and goes, "One interruption is fine. Get it out of your system." UC Irvine made it clear to their police that no interruptions, no form of protest would be tolerated on this night. We're not tolerating anything. I was already in handcuffs, as Mark Petraka was saying that, ironically enough. And so the protest continues, the event goes on, and then I would be in the back room and I would just hear, the level of voices, like it's almost like a football game, like, and then like the crowd would erupt, and then it would settle back down, and then as it settles back down, another guy comes into the back and they arrest him and they put him down next to me. And so it continued, the third protester, the fourth protester. After the fourth protester, Michael Oren takes a 10-minute break in order to collect his thoughts, and then he comes back onto the stage. Immediately the protests continue. And it goes number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9, and then number 10. After the 10th protester, the plan was that all the supporting students who were in the audience were going to stand up, have a loud walkout, and leave the auditorium. So the 10th student gets up. And also the plan was, actually I'll get to this in a second. So the 10th student gets up, he yells out his statement, and then he begins to leave, and he is arrested, and he is put into the back with us. Now the large student walkout ensues immediately after, right after he gets up, and all the students are walking out and they're chanting, "Whose university?" and everyone responds back, "Our university." And it's a chant that I think exists pretty much across the country. And it's not, to be arrogant or cocky or anything if no one understands the chant. It's really just to reinforce the idea that those who make the campus university what it is are its students and its faculty. And it's been something that gets repeated all across California in order to show that we are, what makes the university what it is the research that goes into it, the academics, and not the special interests and the privatization of the public education system. And so they're chanting, "Whose university?" And one of the students that's chanting is grabbed by police and arrested. And so we're all sitting in the back. The 10 of us were expected. We knew who was going to be the 10 that were going to protest. And so we're sitting in the back, and all of a sudden an 11th person comes in named Hakeem, who we all knew, and all of us were like, "What the heck, Hakeem? What are you doing here?" But anyways, he becomes the 11th man arrested, and we become the Irvine 11, and he gave us a much nicer name than Irvine 10. Irvine 11 just has a nice ring to it, so thank you, Hakeem, very much. Hakeem's actually in medical school right now, so good luck to him. And so the protest, for the most part, is done. The event, actually the plan was that before the event, the plan that we had put in place said that the student walkout was to occur at 6:25. The event was going to start at 5:30. We would be done at 6:25. The event itself ends at 7 o'clock. Now the event continues. It goes for about another 20 minutes, uninterrupted. Michael Oren completes his speech, and then the event is over at that point in time. Now, oftentimes the argument has been against us, well, you didn't allow Michael Oren to finish his speech. One, you can watch the video, the entire video, not the 5 or 10 minute YouTube clips, and it clearly shows that Michael Oren finished his speech, and that was the first thing that was thrown at us. And even in order to quell the pro-Zionist bombardment on the Chancellor's office for the embarrassment that had occurred the night before, that next day, Chancellor Drake, our Chancellor at the university, actually comes out and says, "Oh, the event was a success, Michael Oren completed his speech." So argument 1 has been debunked by the Chancellor, as well as by the video itself. Now the second argument that gets put on us, well, you didn't allow for the audience to ask questions and for Michael Oren to field the questions and respond to them. Now, to get to that, Michael Oren, the event was supposed to start at 5:30. Michael Oren actually showed up 30 minutes late because he was going to a VIP event that he was in like a nearby room or something of that sort. And so he had this VIP event that he was at, and he ends up running 30 minutes late, and he comes to the event at 6 o'clock, and that's when it begins. And then he goes for about 45 minutes, and then he's done. There's about 10 minutes left before 7 in which he ends his speech, and he says thank you and walks off the stage. Now, as we found out later, he still had 10 minutes to field questions and answers even though he was 30 minutes late. Now, as we found out later, we see a picture of Kobe Bryant with none other than Michael Oren, the Los Angeles Lakers star Kobe Bryant. And so our lawyers actually investigated this a bit. And so as it turns out, as the head of Los Angeles Lakers security testified in court, was that Michael Oren had a photo opportunity right before that night's Laker game, which is at 7:30. And if anybody knows Southern California geography and knows LA in specific, the traffic going into downtown LA where the Lakers play at the Staples Center is horrendous. And if you're going from Irvine to Los Angeles, God help you, if you're trying to go at 6:50 or 7 o'clock in order to get into downtown. And so he really had to hightail it out of the event in order to get this photo with Kobe Bryant and to meet Kobe Bryant and whatnot before the game. And even though Kobe Bryant was actually injured at the time, he still had to sit on the bench. And so Kobe killed Q&A and not us, in case anyone was wondering. Now, I'm not a Kobe fan. I don't really like the Lakers. I hope people here are probably Pistons fans and not Lakers fans. I don't like the Pistons, but I rooted for them against the Lakers in the NBA Finals a few years back. But anyways, the event is over, and the night is done. We're booked, we're released, we're cited, everything, and we get to go home finally. We get together, we all meet up, and we're like, you know what? Great job, guys. Mission accomplished. And so the next day comes, and all of a sudden the local media picks up on it, they start talking about it, even it gets into some international newspapers, some Israeli newspapers, other papers, and then all of a sudden it's becoming this big story. And then another day or two passes by, and the UC Irvine administration all of a sudden has emails for us in our inbox that say, hey, we think you might have broken some school rules, so we should probably sit down and meet. Now, 3 of us were actually Riverside students. UC Riverside is our sister school within the UC system, so from here on out, UC Riverside dealt with them, and for the rest of us, the 8 of us who were UC Irvine students, UC Irvine dealt with us, the UC Irvine administration dealt with us. And so we go through this long academic disciplinary hearing procedures with the university, which lasts about 7 months. It goes from February till early September. And these meetings last for a very long time. In the end, each one of us is academically disciplined, and also the Muslim Student Union is held responsible for the protests by the university and is suspended for a full academic year, and later is, upon appeal, that suspension was reduced to a quarter suspension, which is 10 weeks in the University of California system. And so we thought, okay, it's unjust because, as I said, so many other protests had occurred, and they were never disciplined academically or in any fashion. But okay, the story's over. We can all go about our lives. But then a few weeks later, we begin to get word through the grapevine that the Orange County District Attorney has sent investigators into the field in order to begin to question students who were at the event. And really, I say question, it was more like intimidate and harass. And these investigators would show up at people's houses on Sunday mornings at 5 a.m., banging on the door, yelling, "This is the police, open up, open up." And then even at times, this went on for a few months, or at least a month and a half, in which they would show up every few days at somebody's house, banging on the door, and the parents of the student that they wanted to question would not be at home, either at school or wherever he was, or she was, and the police would begin to intimidate and harass the parents, saying, "I know he's in here, I know she's in here, let me into the house," and it really just became this tactic of intimidation and harassment that went on for a very long time. And so this continues, and then all of a sudden we get word that the District Attorney, Tony Rakakis, has begun a process of legal procedures that allow for him to charge us with felonies. Now, the things that he did were grand jury subpoenas, he summoned a grand jury, and he enacted search warrants, all of which can only be used in very high situation cases. It has to be a big deal. Like, you have to have killed somebody, you have to have done something crazy in order for you to have this type of stuff thrown at you. And so, for us really, it's like, well, we didn't really do anything, and we're 10 or 11 Muslim students. So, I mean, what other than terrorism could be thrown at us? I mean, that's usually what's thrown at Muslims these days, is that if we don't like you, you're a terrorist, and that way no one will question us, because that's what Muslims are. at least in the eyes of so many media outlets and so many people in this country, unfortunately. And so we were expecting that somehow, some way, he was trying to get some terrorism charges thrown at us. And so the grand jury subpoenas begin, and in order for you to be summoned in front of a grand jury, you have to have a subpoena delivered to you by hand from the investigator or from somebody from the district attorney's office. Now, in order to do this, the district attorney put in a lot of work in order to figure out people's schedules or whatever. I don't know what he did, but he ends up pulling people out. He pulled one girl out of a midterm in order to deliver the papers to her. And then he also, not him specifically, but his investigators at least, even one guy is driving home after school or at some point in time, and he's driving home or driving somewhere and he decides, you know what, I need to pull over and get gas. And so he pulls into a gas station and an unmarked Crown Victoria all of a sudden pulls up next to him, and a guy in a suit comes out and is like, here you go, here's your papers. So they put in a lot of work to follow students around, and there was upwards of a dozen students who were subpoenaed in order to go and testify in front of the grand jury. And so all this is occurring, and we're expecting, you know what, felony charges. Now, the statute of limitation within the state of California is 365 days. What that means is that from the day of the incident, or the time when the incident occurred, you have, as the district attorney, 365 days to file a misdemeanor charge against that person for whatever crime you suspect them of committing. After 365 days, you can no longer file a misdemeanor, you can only file a felony, which is, I think, 3 or 5 years. I don't remember for a felony. Now, on day 363 or 364, the DA decides, I don't have enough information for a felony, I guess I'm just going to have to file misdemeanors. And so we're officially charged with misdemeanors in very early February of 2011, pretty much 1 or 2 days before the 1 year anniversary of that incident. And so we're officially charged with misdemeanors. The first being conspiracy to disturb a public meeting, and then disturbance of a public meeting. I believe he had to dust out the law books in order to get this law and find it. And in fact, it's been in the California law books for over 100 years, and maybe 3 or 4 people, at least from what some attorneys have told us, have actually been convicted of this law in California over the past 100 years or so. So it's really never used. But it was used against us. And actually, the charges with which the DA charged us with are known as California Penal Code 403. Now, the night we were arrested, we were actually arrested and cited for a violation of California Penal Code 626. I don't remember what 626 is in words, but the point is that we were booked and cited and released by the police on a charge that we were never actually charged with by the district attorney. We were charged with something completely different, just to even bring it closer to home that the UC Irvine administration really was just trying to find anything to arrest us with. And so we're charged, and now it looks like we're going to court. And so we begin, and really, at least in our opinion, and I think a lot of what took place over the next 7 or 8 months helps cement this idea, was that the DA, being an elected public official, this is, you know, he's a big-time guy within Orange County. He's the head prosecutor. He doesn't actually go to court and prosecute cases. He doesn't argue in front of the judge. He's just an elected political official that runs the district attorney's office. And so the district attorney himself actually decides, you know what, I'm going to offer you a settlement. And he comes to the table in order to offer the settlement himself, which is a big deal for the district attorney to take the time out to deal with a bunch of non-violent misdemeanors and sit down at the table with us. And it really becomes a non-negotiable settlement. His offer is, we plead guilty, we do a bunch of hours of community service, the charges go on our record, and we call it a day, no need to go to court. For him, it's a way to score cheap political points. Now, I say that because if anyone is familiar with Orange County, it's not exactly the nicest place for people of color, or for Muslims for that matter. Orange County is in a democratic state, which obviously votes blue most of the time since it's democratic. Orange County is known as Red County because it's so Republican. And even, I don't know if anyone's ever seen the YouTube video of the Yorba Linda Community Center protest. But what had happened at Yorba Linda, which is in Orange County, is that the Muslim community had been holding a fundraising event in order to help with some women's relief fund. I don't remember specifically what type of relief fund it was, but it was one of those things where it's like, wow, this is a great cause, how could anyone object to this? And it was a big family event, families were going to the event, so the Tea Party, of course, since it's Muslims doing something, decides we're going to go and protest. And so the Tea Party shows up, and during the protest, a councilwoman, or a former councilwoman, I don't remember if she was in office at the time, actually gets up during the protest and gives a talk to rally up the Tea Party goers who have gone to the protest, and she says, and you can find it in the video itself, she says, "I know a bunch of American soldiers who would be very happy to send them to their God." And so that's Orange County for you. Is that kind of stuff flies in Orange County, and that kind of stuff gets you political points in Orange County, is, hey, let's hang some Muslims out to dry, or let's hang some people of color out to dry. It's rough in Orange County. I know it's California, I know it's palm trees, I know it's nice sunny beaches, but it's not always so friendly to people of color in Orange County. And so, really, the DA is trying to score some cheap political points, and even he ends up calling the case the UCI Muslim case. And so we became known as the Muslim case within Orange County. And it looks like we're going to court because we're not willing to take the settlement offer. And for us, it was really, we did nothing wrong. We didn't do anything criminal, and we're not going to take some cheap offer in order to allow for the district attorney to score some cheap political points by hanging us out to dry. We're going to fight this through the legal system, because if anything, hopefully that will vindicate us. And so it looks like we're going to trial, and we begin to go through the process of pretrial motions and everything that comes with a court case. And so in the process of getting ready for a trial and the pretrial motions, you have to engage in something called discovery, where both sides produce the evidence that they're going to bring forth in court, and you go from there. And so in the process of delivery, or I forgot even what I said. Anyway, in discovery, sorry, in the process of discovery, the district attorney brings forth the evidence they're going to use, which came about as a result of the search warrant, which ended up being 100,000 documents of our emails given from Google, Yahoo, Hotmail, all the email service providers gave up our emails. And so he has 100,000 documents. Our lawyer is reading through these documents, and she realizes at one point in time, wait, a lot of these emails are addressed from you guys to me, or from me to you guys, and I'm your attorney. And there's something called attorney-client privilege, and it's illegal for that to be used as evidence, because anything you say to your attorney is confidential. And so we file a motion in this regard, and we actually the judge ends up agreeing with us and strikes out 20,000 documents from these 100,000 documents for being illegally obtained by the district attorney for attorney-client privilege, and he ends up also kicking off three of the attorneys from the district attorney's office who are working on the case, as well as the lead investigator from the case, which is a huge blunder for the district attorney. For him to do something that unethical to lead to that many people being kicked off is a pretty big deal. And so we end up getting all this evidence kicked out. Now, the main piece of evidence being used against Hakeem, who was poorly picked out from the crowd, is an email from him to one of the attorneys saying, "Hey, Reen," which is our attorney's name, "the reason why I was picked out of the crowd was because I was leading the chants." And so that's the main piece of evidence being used against Hakeem, is really self-indictment. And so that evidence piece is thrown out, and there's no longer really any evidence against Hakeem. And so the district attorney decides to return to the table with Hakeem, and he offers him a no guilty plea in which he does 40 hours of community service, and all charges are dropped against him. And so all of us are like, you know what, great deal, Hakeem, take it. And so that's how we become 10 students on trial rather than 11 students on trial, in case anyone was ever wondering what happened to the 11th guy. And so we end up getting ready for trial. And trial is supposed to start in late August, early September. And when you begin trial, the district attorney actually has this 10-day thing that he can do, in which right before trial starts, he can be like, you know what, he can push the trial back 10 days. And it's something that's allowed for the DA to do at any point in time for pretty much no reason whatsoever. It's allowed. And so we get to the late August when the trial is supposed to start, and all of a sudden the DA decides he wants to use his 10-day pass, or whatever it is that he has. Now, I don't want to play off the victim role, because none of us perceive ourselves to be victims of anything. And I don't want to give that nature off, that somehow we're victims and pity us. We're not victims. Let me be clear about that. But it's more, I'm going to tell you all this more so that there's an understanding, because oftentimes we get asked, well, how does this happen in Orange County? So just to allow for a little bit more understanding, the DA pushes back the trial 10 days to coincidentally, the beginning of the trial lands on the day after September 11th. September 11th, the 10th anniversary of September 11th was a Sunday last year. And our trial is going to start on Monday. And during jury selection, you can imagine that in Orange County, a lot of ideas and a lot of people's minds are focused on 9/11. I remember specifically watching the news during that time, and anytime it goes to commercials, And rightfully so. There's all these things on the news about the commemoration of the terrorist attacks that happened on 9/11, and the events that they're going to have to commemorate, and the news programs that they're going to have to commemorate the 10th anniversary. And so it's on everybody's mind. And we have a 300-person jury pool to go through. So the judge allows us to file a questionnaire in order to help go through the juries and kick people out. And so we get the questionnaires back. And one of the questions happens to be, have you ever had any negative experience with Muslims? And so oftentimes, the answer is yes, 9/11. And so it wasn't a very nice jury pool to begin with. This is Orange County once again. And so even one of our attorneys, who has been an attorney for multiple decades, a civil rights attorney who has a lot of accolades within the state of California, he even says, this is the worst jury pool I've ever seen in my life. And he's past 65 years old. So he's seen a lot of jury pools. And so we have not exactly the friendliest jury in the world, but nonetheless we're going to continue and we're going to go to trial. Most misdemeanor cases take 2 days. Ours took 4 weeks. And we have, prosecuting our case, the head of the homicide department within Orange County. This is somebody who doesn't do anything but murder cases. And Orange County is a big county and it has a lot of murders. But for some reason, a man who gets paid $200,000 to do his job is put on our case. And he had been on our case for almost 6 or 7 months at that point. So you can imagine the amount of money and taxpayer funds that went into it. And so we go through trial, 4 weeks comes, and at the end of the day, the jury goes into deliberations, and they come out and unanimously were found guilty of both charges. Conspiracy to disturb a public meeting and disturbance of a public meeting. Each charge carries with it a maximum sentence of 6 months in prison, and the DA wants prison time. And so in his sentencing, though, the judge comes out and says, due to the fact that these students were motivated out of sincere belief, they weren't doing it to be hooligans, they just don't go around disrupting things just, to disrupt, but they were doing it out of sincere beliefs, and because they have a history of outstanding character within the community. And this was a nonviolent protest. I don't think this warrants any jail time, so he ends up giving us community service and a probation for 3 years, which is reduced to a year depending on the community service, and also a fine. And so that becomes the end of the road for that part of it. Now the district attorney ends up actually getting made fun of a little in the mainstream media of Orange County and LA County, and the LA Times and the Orange County Register, as well as different public officials within Orange County, begin to come out and say, you know what, yeah, maybe what the students did is not, exactly nice, or it's rude, and we may not like it, and we disagree with it, but is it really worth taxpayer money to be spent in an economic crisis on charging these students and prosecuting them for this long? And so they begin to raise issues of prosecutorial misconduct and a lack of prosecutorial discretion in deciding which cases to prosecute. And so the DA responds back and fights back by saying, in an op-ed that he writes to the OC Register, that the reason why, and I don't want to play the victim card again, just putting that out there, but just so people can understand the way in which Orange County works, the reason why I prosecuted this case was to ensure that a small band of people do not hijack our freedoms. Us being the small band of people. Coming on the eve of 9/11, oftentimes when anyone refers to a small band of people hijacking anything, it refers to the 9/11 terrorists. And who's our, by the way? Last time I checked, all of 11 of us and 10 of us who were on trial were American citizens. So we have the same rights as you do, Mr. Tony Rakakis, the name of the Orange County District Attorney. Yet somehow, some way, we don't fit into his notion of our. And that's Orange County for you, is that people of color and Muslims don't fit into our America. And so that's what we were going up against. In the end, we were found guilty, but we decided we're going to appeal the case. Now, the reason behind appealing the case is to make sure that even though we were prosecuted this, that really the prosecution and the guilty verdict was just a bump in the road to get into somewhere better, where we can actually enact real change and begin to change the California Penal Code and the California laws that were used to prosecute us. Because it shouldn't be up to a district attorney to decide what type of speech should be allowed in his district. Because we were prosecuted not based upon our conduct, but rather based upon the content of what we did. If we had stood up and yelled out, "Michael Oren, I love you," and a bunch of people had stood up and clapped for us, most likely that person wouldn't have been arrested and prosecuted. But that's not what we said. Instead, we said things like, "It is a shame that this university has sponsored a mass murderer like yourself. and also Yusur are an accomplice to genocide, propagating murder is an expression of free speech. Judaism is innocent of the crimes of Zionism. And so these are the things we said, and that's really what we were prosecuted for, was the statements that we were making. And so we hope that by going through the appeals verdict, through the appeals process, we can actually have the verdict overstricken, and that we can actually begin to enact real change to allow for anyone to protest in the manner in which they feel fit to protest, whether it's the marginalization of Black and Latino students on our college campuses, whether it's tuition fee hike increases, whether it's the war in Afghanistan, whether it's what's going on in Kashmir, whether it's what's going on anywhere in the world, whatever you feel you have the need to protest for. Because protesting, besides being cool, is a nice way to enact change sometimes and to get your message out as ordinary citizens. We've seen the power of it throughout the Arab world recently, and we're beginning to see the power of it even sometimes here in America. And let's not forget the civil rights movement and everything else that has occurred in this country, as well as other countries. In fact, this country was nearly founded upon one of the first acts of protest, the Boston Tea Party. And so really the idea is to allow for other people to protest, whether it's in California, whether it's in Michigan, wherever it is, wherever you feel the need to protest, go out and protest and have fun doing it. And I really would like to open it up to question and answer session and really just get to feel people's questions and get to hear from you guys. And I'm open even to people challenging what we did. It's cool. We're from California, we're kicked back, we're laid back, palm trees, sunshine, beaches. It's cool. Thank you guys. Would you like me to just field them?
Yeah.
Okay. So if anyone has any questions, I can just call on people. Yes.
You said like that the school, what is it called? You were put on probation. What exactly like did the school do to you guys?
The school academically disciplined each one of us as students, and then they also suspended the Muslim Student Union at UC Irvine.
And that just, they didn't repeal that, or like?
There was an appeal of the suspensions, and then the suspension of the Muslim Student Union was reduced to a quarter rather than a year-long academic suspension. Yes.
What happened with the appeal that you guys did for your original acceptance? Your community services. Didn't you say you appealed that?
Oh, the guilty verdict?
Yeah.
Okay. The guilty verdict was last September, or late last September. And so we filed a notice of appeal. You have about 30 days or so to file a notice of appeal, which means you're going to appeal it. We haven't yet actually compiled the appeal in total because we're still deciding as to which way we want to address the appeal, whether it's selective prosecution or whether it's some other things, in order to bring about like the most, the best argument that we can in the appeals process. So these things take time, a very long time. So we're still in the appeals process. Yeah. Yes, sir.
First, I wanted to thank you and the rest of the group for posting such a disgusting person like Michael Warren, and I hope he gets more of what's coming to him.
Me too.
The question is, upon you guys getting arrested, were there any like pro-Muslim legal groups or ACLU? Did they ever get involved and reached out, or did they kind of sidestep the whole?
Mass Freedom Foundation, as well as CARE Los Angeles and MPAC. I don't know if MPAC is really out here. Muslim Public Affairs Council. They're, I think, mostly based in Los Angeles and Washington D.C. All of them came out in support of us in terms of releasing press statements, and even Caroline would help out in other ways along with MPAC. Mass Freedom Foundation doesn't really have much of a base in Orange County, but they did offer their services as well. The ACLU provided, some of their lawyers actually helped our lawyers out. National Lawyers Guild also, a few of our lawyers are members of the National Lawyers Guild. All of our lawyers actually did everything pro bono, by the way. They did it for free. And this was a very long case, including criminal defense attorneys who were not involved in civil rights work either, came out and did it for free as well. And so they all provided services. The Muslim Legal Fund of America, which has taken on cases like the Sami al-Aryan case, the Holy Land Foundation 5 case, and some other cases, has also been helping cover the legal costs, because even despite the fact that it was done pro bono, it still cost $100,000 to go to court and to go to trial for that long, and the appeal itself cost $60,000. And so they have been helping raise money in order to cover the legal costs of the case. Yes?
It's such a challenge for you to get national media attention for what's going on in Gaza. What kinds of, that must be very frustrating for you and the protests that you hold. Is there anything that you can hope to do during the upcoming conventions to try to get attention for your cause?
For the Irvine 11 cause, or
Well,
just for Palestine in general?
For Palestine in general.
Well, we don't necessarily have anything coming up within Southern California. I do know though, actually Jewish Voices for Peace is probably one of the coolest organizations in the world. And they actually, a few months after we did our protest, they went and protested, and this is a group who's committed to ending the occupation of Palestine through the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, and like ideology in which you boycott, divest, sanction pretty much anything coming out of Israel. And anything that profits out of the occupation. And so they went to Benjamin Netanyahu's lecture in New Orleans a while ago, a few months after when we did what we did, and they protested in the exact same manner that we did. And they actually afterwards, when the district attorney's office filed charges, they got a statement. They had 5,000 people sign off on a statement from their organization in which they said, if what the Irvine 11 did was criminal, we have all done the exact same thing, so come and arrest us, and they hand-delivered it to the district attorney. So that was really cool. And they've done a lot of stuff like that. And they even came out and said after they did what we did, and I've met a few of the guys who protested Benjamin Netanyahu from JVP, they said we emulated it based on the Irvine 11. And even I remember one of their guys wrote on his Facebook afterwards, I now understand what my Jewish privilege allows me to do, and in sense of the Irvine 11 can't do. So they're very brave individuals, all of them. And Jewish Voices for Peace is mad cool. So, yes, sir.
What's the school's reaction after the journal?
The school doesn't really like us too much. UC Irvine has had a history of stifling pro-Palestinian activism on campus. The UC system itself is very heavily funded by Zionists, UC Irvine in particular. The Samueli family, which is very staunchly pro-Zionist, and we've had people who have met with them before and understand where they're coming from, and so it's not just like hearsay. We have proof of their pro-Zionist endeavors and whatnot. They actually fund the School of Engineering. Their name is on the School of Engineering at both UC Irvine and UC Los Angeles, UCLA. And so they put a lot of money into the UC Irvine system. UC Irvine Law School as well, which just opened up, 70% of their funding comes from private donors rather than the government. Despite the fact that they're a public school. Their major funder is Donald Bren, who's also a pro-Zionist and the fourth richest Jewish person on Forbes 500 list, and fourth richest Jewish person in America. So he's really rich. He's like top 20 on Forbes 500 list. He heavily funds UC Irvine and the UC Irvine Law School. Mark Yudof, the president of the UC system, is an avowed Zionist. He has come out before and said, even though I'm the president of the entire UC system, I can take off my public official's hat and I can put on my Israel hat as I wish. In our academic disciplinary hearings, his attorney for the UC Region system was flown down to represent the UC Irvine administration in our academic disciplinary hearings. Her name is Kim Penfield. She's also a board member of the Anti-Defamation League, which for almost 5 or 6, maybe even longer years had been going after the Muslim Student Union at UC Irvine for its pro-Palestinian activism, had gotten the Department of Education to come in and the Department of Civil Rights to look into anti-Semitism charges on campus, which were all found to come up with nothing whatsoever because, as we all know, anti-Israel activity doesn't necessarily have to be anti-Semitic, and is not. And so even more stuff for Brad Sherman, a congressman from California, also puts heavy pressure on the university. And wanted the university and the FBI to investigate us after George Galloway came to campus for funding Hamas. That never ended up doing anything. But yeah, I could go on, but I think that gives the idea. Yes, sir.
How did it affect you academically? Did it hurt, the records hurt you, or did it actually help by your resume?
I still have yet to find out, and I don't know if I will ever find out. For applying to graduate schools, you do have a character and fitness portion that you have to fill out, in which they ask you, have you ever been academically disciplined by your university, and have you ever been convicted of a crime? So I have to check yes for both boxes and then explain what it is that I did. In my graduate school applications, I'm not in graduate school yet, hopefully in fall 2012. I put down in my personal statement like the Irvine 11 incident. So I'm more embracing it. I'm not ashamed of what we did. I took on more of an embrace role with the protest. Whether it will affect me, it would possibly close some doors, but those aren't doors I'm supposed to go through anyways. And, you know, inshallah, to open up other doors for me in some way. Sometimes you never know these things, right? You never know, you know, what God's wisdom is in everything. And so, if it closes some doors, so be it. Alhamdulillah, you know, praise be to God that that's what happened. But I don't have any proof as of whether or not it has affected me academically or not. I'm sure some schools won't like it, but so be it. Yes?
Yeah, I don't know how, like, how much you know, you've like done BDS on your campus or not, but, like, what would you suggest how to actually implement it? Like, especially on our campus, it's very pro-Israel and very apathetic, so.
Yeah, I've heard the University of Michigan and the Michigan public university system is very pro-Zionist in the same way that the UC system is. Really the best model I have seen so far was UC Berkeley a few years back. And we actually tried to emulate UC Berkeley and what they were able to accomplish. We were never able to get as far as they did. So we were kind of in the same boat as the one that you're describing. Also, the alma mater of Rachel Corrie, we actually had a chance to go visit it for speaking engagements as well. Their student body actually voted to divest from Israel with an 80% yes vote in favor of divestment. Their president of the school ended up saying there's no way we're divesting. But their student body voted 80%. If you went to UC Irvine, you probably couldn't get 80% of the students to vote yes for free burritos on Monday night. Because that's how apathetic it is. Like, they just be like, I'm not going to go and vote. But yeah, it's tough. I really think it does take a dedicated campaign. At UC Berkeley, they were able to actually get it into legislation, and their legislative body voted yes to divest from Israel, and their student body. So the student body doesn't have any real power, it's more symbolic than anything. Their student body president ended up vetoing the legislation, and they weren't able to outvote the veto, which was unfortunate, but they have had the best model, and even though it failed, in the end, it was still a big push forward, and I think a big success in the greater movement of beginning the BDS movement and ending the occupation. Even like you go to Olympia, Washington, and there's this little food co-op grocery store that decided we're not going to sell Israeli crackers anymore, and we're going to boycott Israel. And really, it's more symbolic than anything for them to say we're going to boycott, because all they really had from Israel was these crackers. Like, it's a huge grocery store and just some crackers. They got sued by other members of the co-op who said that the board who decided to boycott the Israeli goods and Israeli goods in general is not acting out in the best interest of the entire membership and is not looking at what the membership wants. And they're currently going through, and they're getting heavily funded to sue the co-op. And their trial was supposed to, or like the first trial court date was supposed to occur like a week or two ago, and it got pushed back. I think it's going to be on February 23rd. But my point is that the little things, be they symbolic, they may not achieve much. It's just Israeli crackers, but the symbolism in itself is a big deal. And so even here, if you don't end up being able to successfully pass legislation, even if you can just push it hard enough with your student body legislative people, you can help motivate other people, and you can help begin to, you know, really it becomes an intimidation factor. And when people try to intimidate you, you're probably doing something wrong. And when they start putting money up against you, hey, you're going to be part of a bigger battle. And I think that's an important thing to understand, is that you may be doing it here, but other people are going to be doing it somewhere else. And that together, hopefully we can actually begin to push the movement forward. But in terms of specific things to do, I don't know, because we were never able to do it either, so it's hard for me to tell.
We have room for one more question. If not.
Stuck in there. Well, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I've been given the really difficult task of closing out after that very well put speech. But my name is Fatima Khan, and I am the president of the Muslim Law Student Association at MSU College of Law. And so when I first heard about this speech, I was very excited about it, really excited to help sponsor it, because this is just the kind of thing that our organization tries to bring to the forefront of law students and lawyers' minds, is that the decision on the part of the district attorney, on the part of the prosecutor here, was a choice, very much a choice. It wasn't really motivated by law, because as Osama says, he had to dust the books off. He had to really search for a reason to bring these charges. And I think one thing that is very important here is the backstory that we're hearing. We're hearing the backstory of the Irvine 11. We're hearing everything that caused this decision to happen. And I think that that's a story that we need to share